format's going to be today is going to be each speaker is going to make a presentation, and it'll be followed up by question and answer. We're going to try to make it interactive. So all the questions, please have it in writing, so it'll make it more flow a little bit better for us. If you have cell phones, can we put it on vibrate so it doesn't disturb? If you need to use the cell phones, please go out in the reception so as to not disturb the speakers. You are given a questionnaire that please fill it out and return it at lunchtime. And you were given the reflections, which is to take your own notes as you please on that. So first of all, let me invite Dr. Shailesh Anandji. Let me give you some introduction on Dr. Shailesh Anandji. He's a practicing eye surgeon in India, Vadodara. He's an experienced holistic science practitioner. He was blessed with self-realization by Dada Bhagwan in 1977 and has traveled through several countries for sharing his experiences of inner science. So let me recognize Dr. Mehta.
So very good morning to everybody. I hope I'm clearly audible. Is that fine? If anything is there, please raise the hand and tell me. Let's be more informal and more interactive rather than formal, okay? So my job is to introduce the holistic inner science in seminar. Every one of us is aware that today, with the progress of various disciplines of science, we have been gifted with abundant of gadgets and luxuries and comforts. I can talk from here to any corner of the world, seeing the face, nanotechnology, stem cells, genetics, so-called neutrinos or God particles. But if I see inside, despite having all these gadgets, comforts and luxuries, do I have inner happiness which I am searching for? Do I have inner unrest or lack of harmony? Do I have many unanswered questions as I will go through? If it is so, then I need the extension or the science which can answer my inner quests and queries. That is where the holistic inner science comes into play. There is one fundamental sentence that in one pan of the weighing scale you put the outer comforts and luxuries, in the inner pan you put the inner happiness. There should be a balance. If there is much of the imbalance, person may need to have sleeping pills or psychiatric medicines. Unfortunately, it is said that in the developed countries the sale of psychiatric medicines is highest and it's on the rise. So let's go for some reflection questions. Am I having a balanced holistic life? Do I have a happy, harmonious, rich and meaningful inner life? Is the purpose of my life clear? How do I manage the unfavorable situations? Favorable is fine, but if I am getting some unfavorable situations like clashes or illness or death of someone near and dear, how do I manage myself? Am I carrying mental baggage that keeps me dragging down? Now, for achieving the best in life, there are many questions. What should I be doing? Should I be doing yoga, meditation, mindful living or other practices? And how far each can take me or how far each has taken me? What's in my realm and what is not? Ultimately, should I know who am I? And if yes, how can I know that or how can I experience that? So holistic inner science is the understanding of my own life and living. Everybody knows I am, so understanding of I with mind, speech and body, inner happenings and outer circumstantial happenings along with the natural regulatory system. It deals with the relative self and real self or pure conscious and matter. It's a science of my own relative inner self, as we will go through in the subsequent slides. It answers what is in my realm and what is not, or what is fate and free will. If somebody wants to go a little deeper down in the life understanding, what is the cause and effect? Where are the causes laid down? Where is the effect? How does the effect come out? Who am I? What are the natural attributes of my pure self? So, in short, it gives me everything from art and science of happy, harmonious daily living to the absolute pure knowledge or the ultimate. It is very easy, practical, and has many unique aspects. It does not ask for external renunciation, rituals, traditions, or any hard penance. What it asks is only for correct understanding, and it said that incorrect understanding or wrong beliefs lead to puzzles. Correct understanding or right beliefs resolve the puzzles or lead to happiness. Most importantly, it can be experienced by one and all. Now, how does it really act? Very briefly, the inputs go through the 5 senses. Suppose there is one event going on and we all see the same event, but we all experience, perceive and react or respond differently. Why? Because the beliefs or visions are different, and that is the main reason. Here is the same graphical things, that it is like a machinery, my inner self is functioning like machinery. If I can change this, all the things can be changed. So, to detail it a little more, the science of relative inner self has mind, reflective consciousness, intellect and ego. It is under the influence of beliefs, opinions, I and my or mine. Whatever understanding I have, whether it is correct or incorrect, it is coupled with the awareness, but without understanding, the awareness does not function, and ultimately if I know who I am, or if I have the awareness of pure self, the whole scenario changes. Now, the same thing in other aspects. There are only 2 things in the word, self and circumstances, and it is our beliefs or visions or understanding which really acts. If I have the incorrect understanding, it will give me grief or sorrow. So, do the circumstances make me happy or unhappy? The answer to holistic, as per holistic science, is no. If I have the right beliefs, same thing will make me happy or will help me gain from within. Nobody likes difficulties in life, for example, but once I understood that difficulties in life function like vitamins, it helps me to develop from within. It helps to understand my inner potentials and bring them out to overcome that, and it makes me a more mature man. So, if it is understood in a correct perspective, you can gain in any situation. Now, some scientific correlations. I happen to come across a very good book of Bruce H. Lipton, How the Beliefs Function and What is the Scientific Correlation of Beliefs. So, beliefs work like software driving the hardware of mind, speech and body. Beliefs control everything and shape our personal reality, and it is the scientist Bruce H. Lipton who came out with a wonderful book, Biology of Belief. He is a cell scientist working with human cell cloning and other things. Over the 25 to 30 year span of his career, he researched and he came out that you can change your beliefs and you can change your entire life. They termed it as epigenetics. This is just for the few minds who are trying to understand and correlate with the ongoing scientific facts. And this is another gentleman, Robs Williams, who came out with the Psych-K program. The basis is just how can you change your beliefs to change your entire life. Now, on the other side, there is a mind, body and conscious, all are connected, and how they are connected. Initially, we doctors, I am a doctor, so we were only focusing on the body, but then we realized that no, it is not only the body, it is body, mind and conscious which are connected. And just for the little curiosity, there are sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system, as I have shown here, and whatever little happening in the form of information, suppose Dr. Patil sends me an appreciation message on WhatsApp, even if I am hungry, everything will be positively charged, and somebody sends me a criticism message that no, you did not do well, and that will even though I am fed well, will put me down. So, these are various things that function through the autonomic nervous system of the body and affects entire whole body system. Same thing, it affects all the cells of the body, which the Bruce H. Lipton has proved differently. So, everybody knows that the stress releases various hormones like cortisol and adrenaline. It has the effect even on the immune system of the body, and when one is passing through a lot of stresses and not able to resolve or handle it, one is more prone to diseases and vice versa. So, there are other proofs coming that this inside the gross body there is electrical body or the energy body, which we doctors measure in the form of electrocardiogram, electromyogram or electroencephalogram. Somebody had described the various chakras, and I was not believing, but when I saw these pictures, I believed that yes, there are energy, subtle energy body. When one is angry, this photograph is different. When one is in a hatred mode, these are different. And when one is in a helping mode, loving mode or a forgiving mode, these are affected. So, this is a so dynamic a thing that each thing affects not only the mind, but body, consciousness, everything. Here are some more proofs that how the attitudes and thoughts can have the effect on causation of the disease or the, for that matter, cure of the disease. So, this one Wolosky MD, he came out with the book Change Your Mind and Change Your Life. So many people have been working. What I am trying to say is there is a whole institute, American Institute of Holistic or Alternative Medicine, and there are so many things. There are some more correlations that the thoughts can affect the physical outcome and the matter. They have proved that our thoughts are real things and they do have the effect on the physical outcome. There is definite interaction between consciousness and matter. So, coming back to the holistic science, it is all inclusive, all comprehensive. It is useful and beneficial to one and all, irrespective of caste, color, creed, nationality, faith or socio-economic status. We can very aptly say that the universe is within. People say macrocosm and microcosm. So, everything is part of whole and it is interconnected. Now, what are the benefits which I can expect by knowing the holistic inner science? Of course, basic is happy, harmonious human living. Inner freedom, am I free within, even though I am living in a totally free country? So, inner freedom, realizations of inner potentials, ultimate truth and ultimate goal, whatever you say, salvation, liberation, whatever word you use it. Now, taking stock of my current situation, where am I today? Before or during the seminar, you keep on asking yourself, where am I? I may be doing meditation, I may be doing yoga. Is yoga only for body exercise or something more? I may or may not be following some religious belief or faith. I may be going through the route of modern science. Wherever or whatever I am, this holistic inner science is complementary and can show the light to go ahead from wherever I am. So, a word about seminar has already been said by Dr. Mukesh, who is a dentist and who wants to see your teeth smiling, so he can guide you about that part also during the seminar. So, presentations would be followed by interactive sessions. Make it live by asking as many questions, write down on a card given to you. It is all ours and by us. We may not look at the academic completeness or beauty, but if it leads to our inner journey, the basic purpose is in this world where a lot of our time and energy is stuck into all external things and still in search of happiness. If it leads us to look inside and have some inner journey, I think, and even if it gives a single vision which I can apply going back to the life, I think the purpose is well served. I hope all will put the cell phones in the silent mode. And a word about holistic scientists. Who is the holistic scientist? One who has the thorough experience of real self and relative self, whose all doership ego and ownership mindness ego has been vanished, and who can throw the light on science of conscious and matter related to conscious, that means living beings, and has only one wish, that let this science reach to every nook and corner of the world. So, each one and all can have the happy harmonious living, and these are the two people who I owe my life and experiences to them, and they have the only one wish, that let this science reach to one and all. We have gathered together today as an extension or as a result of their hearty wish. Thank you very much.
Our next speaker is the director of St. Francis of Woods Church. He's going to be talking to us about St. Francis's life and teachings as a model for holistic wholeness. Let me welcome Mr. Brad Wilson.
Thank you. Good morning. It's very good to be here. It was quite an honor to be asked to speak here today. I very much consider myself a student on this topic and not an expert. But I'll start out by telling you a little bit about St. Francis of the Woods. We're located on Highway 33 between Coyle and Perkins, and it's a spiritual renewal center. We have cabins and 500 acres of grounds, and it's really a place for people of all faiths to come and focus on their own spirituality. And it's a place to get away and be in nature and hopefully find yourself and find something deeper there. As I said, I'm not a scholar and I'm not a mystic. I'm a student like yourselves. But I hope that this will be more of a dialogue than a lecture. But I do want to tell you a story, and it's a story about St. Francis of Assisi, because I believe that his life models these things that we're talking about today. And from the Christian tradition, I may not use the same language that the other presenters are going to use, but I think that the things that St. Francis achieved in his life and the inner peace and knowledge that he attained are part of this whole holistic science approach. My educational background is in law, actually. I have a Juris Doctorate from Oklahoma University and was practicing law for 5 years before I took my current position. And so my spiritual training has all been rather informal, self-study, and by experience. And the experiences that have transformed me the most have been making pilgrimage. I've done this a few times in my life. Made pilgrimage to Iona in Scotland, which is it was the monastic center and really a center for education for northern England and all of Europe during the Dark Ages. After that, I made pilgrimage in Egypt to the ancient monasteries of the Christian tradition. The oldest in the world are in Egypt, and the monastic tradition in Christianity really grew out of Egypt. I've also been to Istanbul, or Constantinople, which was the center of Christianity for the East for a long time. But most recently, I made pilgrimage to Assisi in Italy. And in many ways, this was the most transformative pilgrimage of my life. And it's really because of this man, St. Francis of Assisi. I'm sure you've all heard of him. He was born in the late 1100s in Assisi, which is in the middle of Italy. He was born to a wealthy merchant. At this time in Italy, there wasn't really a middle class. There were nobility, and then there were the rest of the people. But the middle class was starting to build, and St. Francis's father was a trader, and he would go to France and acquire garments and beautiful cloths and fabrics and bring them back and sell them in Italy. And he was such a successful businessman that they eventually became the richest family in Assisi. So St. Francis lived a life of luxury as a child. He was known as a playboy. He liked to party and spent a lot of time focusing on himself and his own desires and personal goals. His mother used to tell him stories when he was a child about the famous knights of Europe, Charlemagne and King Arthur. And Francis dreamed of being a famous knight. So in his youth, his goal was to achieve notoriety. St. Francis worked to achieve this goal, and in the 1100s there was a rivalry between a neighboring town, Perugia, and Assisi. And Francis, seeing it as an opportunity to achieve what he always wanted, notoriety and battle, and to become a famous knight, set off with this army. The battle went terribly bad for Francis and the people of Assisi, and he was captured and put in prison for a year. And in prison, his life began to change. After his father paid the ransom after a year, he went back to Assisi, and at first he thought that he would just go back to life as usual. He continued with his parties and wanted to still be a knight, and he set off on a crusade, one of the darkest parts of Christian history. But on the way, he had a vision. And in this vision, he heard a voice, and it said, "What can do more for you, the master or the servant?" And St. Francis said, "The master, of course." And the voice said, "Then why do you leave the master to follow the servant?" And St. Francis stopped what he was doing and turned around and went back into Assisi. He decided not to go on crusade, and he went back to contemplate this idea. The more he thought about it, the more he realized that his calling was not of his father's world. It wasn't of the riches and the wealth that his father had accrued. But St. Francis started developing a heart for those less fortunate. He determined that he would never refuse to anyone who asked. So he made it a point to give to the beggars and the less fortunate in Assisi. When this started to happen, St. Francis' father was very upset with him because he had expected Francis to carry on the family business and the family name and have great worldly success. It became such a problem for Francis' father that he locked him in the basement of their house for almost a year. So this would be the second time that Francis was imprisoned, this time by his own father. Eventually, his father left for France, and his mother let him out of the basement, the prison that his father had created for him. And Francis went to the woods outside of town, to a small church called San Damiano to pray. And while he was praying, he had another vision, and the crucifix spoke to him and said, "Francis, rebuild my church." And right then, Francis sold everything that he had, his horse, his clothes, and gave the money to the priest of the church to help rebuild. And not only that, he asked the priest if he could live there and actually physically help him rebuild the church. He did this, and it infuriated his father even more upon his return. His father took Francis to court because he said that that horse and those clothes and everything that Francis had actually belonged to his father. When the court refused to intervene, Francis' father took it to the church and the bishop, because at this time in Italy, the church had just as much civil authority as the people of the government. The trial was held in the public square, and St. Francis appeared, and his father demanded everything back. And Francis gave literally everything that he had. He took off all of his clothes and stood naked before his father and said, "I will no longer call you my father, but only my Father in heaven, who is our Father of all." And at that moment, the priest gave Francis a cloak to cover his nakedness. And Francis went to the caves north of town to meditate. There are a lot of other stories around St. Francis after this experience. Essentially, he abandoned his life of wealth and comfort and, in his words, married Lady Poverty. He gave all of his possessions and all of his life to this idea that in solidarity with the poor and the least fortunate of society, he could attain something greater than the wealth and the supposed affluence of his father and the notoriety that he thought he once wanted. What's ironic is that in Francis's total surrender of his ego to the service of others, he did attain the notoriety that he wanted as a child, and began to have followers. And at first he didn't want any followers. He just wanted to be alone and do what he thought that he needed to do. But men and women saw the great change in this man's life and thought, this is someone that we need to follow. And he had brothers and even sisters come to him and say, we want to live the way you live. in total solidarity with the poor, owning nothing, and being of service to others. But because this was in Italy in the Middle Ages, I said Pope because our Pope's name is Francis now too, but St. Francis went to the Pope to have his order officially recognized by the Church, and the Pope, on seeing him in his beggar's cloak, essentially Francis owned one tunic for the rest of his life, and it was heavily patched and probably didn't smell very good. The Pope laughed at him and said, "Why would you come to me dressed like this? Go roll with the pigs and see if they will approve your order." And Francis did. He left the Pope's quarters and went and found some pigs and lived with the pigs for a day. But that night, Pope, it was Innocent III, had a dream, and in it, Francis was literally lifting up St. Peter's Basilica, and the Pope realized that this lowly beggar was a man of God and a man of deep knowledge and truth. And so the next day, he sent for Francis, and Francis came back. And the Pope was really upset because not only was he dressed like a beggar, now he smelled because he was rolling with pigs. And he said, "Why would you do this and insult me like this?" And Francis said, "Well, you told me to roll with pigs, and so I did what you asked." And Pope Innocent spoke with Francis for a long time and eventually gave a formal permission for this order. And the rule of St. Francis was essentially a life of poverty. And it seems odd today and in many cultures and then that people would reject what the world calls success and wealth for a life of poverty. But what Francis found and what his followers found was deeper meaning and deeper truth. And one of the things that scholars like to say about St. Francis is that he found God in all things and in all people. One of the stories that Francis talks about that was most influential to him was an encounter with a leper early in his experience of transformation. And in this time, lepers were outcasts of societies. They had to ring bells and announce their presence so people could clear the way and not have to be around them or touch them or even see them most of the time. And Francis was, like most of the people of the time, disgusted by lepers. But one day, walking in the woods, he heard the lepers rattle. And he thought, that this leper is no different than I am, that we are the same. So Francis put aside his disgust and approached the leper, and Francis says that the leper was quite shocked when Francis took his hands and kissed them and said, "We are the same." Another story is that Francis gave a sermon to the birds. There's lots of pictures and even bird feeders of St. Francis. And in this story, it's basically an acknowledgement that Francis saw God at work in everything, in creation, in other people, and wanted to share his inner joy with not only other humans, but the birds of the sky and the creatures of the earth. I wanted to close by sharing a few poems that Francis wrote that kind of display the knowledge that he attained and the inner peace that he achieved through this life of poverty. So there's a few poems for you. God came to my house and asked for charity, and I fell on my knees and cried, "Beloved, what may I give?" "Just love," he said, "just love." This one's a little bit long. It's called The Holy Water. No one lives outside the walls of this sacred place. Existence, the holy water, I need it upon my eyes. It is dear to you, each form. What mother would lose her infant? And we are that to God. Never lost from his gaze are we. Every cry of the heart is attained by light's own arms. You cannot wander anywhere that will not aid you. Anything you touch, God brought into the classroom of your mind. Differences exist, but not in the city of love. Thus, my vows and yours, I know they are the same. I have just peeled the skin from the potato, and you are still contemplating its worth. Sweetheart, indeed we are wonderful nutrients in all, for God made everything. You joined our community at birth, with your Father being who He is. What do the world's scales know of your precious value? The priest and the prostitute, they weigh the same before the Son's immaculate being. But who can bear that truth and freedom? So a wise man adulterated the Scriptures. Every wise man knows this. My soul's face has revealed its beauty to me. Why was it shy so long? Didn't it know how this made me suffer and weep? A different game he plays with his close ones. God tells us truths you would not believe, for most everyone needs to limit his compassion. Concepts of right and wrong preserve the golden seed until one's God's friend comes along and tends your body like a divine bride. The holy sent out a surveyor to find the limits of its compassion and being. God knows a divine frustration whenever he acts like that, for infinite has no walls. Why not tease him about this? Why not accept the freedom from what it means for our Lord to see us as himself? So magnificently sovereign is our lover. Never say, on the other side of this river a different king rules, for how could that be true? For nothing can oppose infinite strength. No one lives outside the walls of this sacred place, existence. The holy water my soul's brow needs is unity. Love opened my eye and was cleansed by the purity of each form. A tool in your hand I am, dear God, the sweetest instrument you have shaped my being into. What makes me now complete, feeling the soul of every creature against my heart? Does every creature have a soul? Surely they do, for anything God has touched will have life forever, and all his creatures he has held. Only love honors God. That sounds as if it could be true, but surely everything he made must be perfect. This one's called the sacraments, and in the Christian tradition, sacraments are the ways in which God imparts his grace to people. I once spoke to my friend, an old squirrel, about the sacraments. He got so excited and ran into his hollow in a tree and came back holding some acorns, an owl feather, and a ribbon. And I just smiled and said, "Yes, dear, you understand. Everything imparts his grace." Thank you. I'll take any questions if you have any. Yeah.
So, Francis spoke through the language of love. I was wondering whether he also had any teachings which he delivered to groups of people.
He did. We have several of St. Francis's writings still. The biggest that contain his teachings are his rules for the order that he established, the first and third rule. And they speak to many topics about how the brothers should live together in community and love. He says that they should have no possessions because possessions encourage quarrelsome behavior and lead to thinking one is better than another. He also admonishes them to not even have a prior. Most of the monastic communities at the time had a prior who was in charge of the community. In Francis's vision for his community, there wasn't one monk who was over the other brothers, but all the brothers were equal and worked together to determine what was best for the whole community. The other writings we have are the admonitions of Francis, and it goes through several different things. But one of the things that Francis has stressed the most is also a teaching of Jesus, and it's essentially that in reality, the first will be last, and the last will be first. And that was really the foundation of his understanding and teachings.
Did he also speak to the general population?
He did. There's a book called God's Troubadour. A troubadour was like a jester, and it said that Francis would go throughout the streets singing and dancing and juggling and preaching. So he was kind of a clown for God. Yes.
You said you have a wooded property between Atkins and Coyle.
Yes.
So what is done there? Like, is there prayers or is there meditation or what goes on?
Yes, we have 500 acres. There are cabins that people can stay in. All of the cabins are available on a donation basis. So people are invited to come out as individuals or groups just to be in nature and kind of get away from the hectic life of the world. We have a 2-mile walking trail through the woods that's just beautiful. We also have a chapel, and we have prayer services. Monday through Friday, we have morning prayer at 8 o'clock. We have a healing service on Thursdays at 6 p.m. And then we have a Sunday worship at 10:30 in the mornings. We also have a beautiful library with over 2,000 volumes on spirituality and religion, primarily from a Christian background, but we also have books on other religions and other spiritual paths, Sufi mysticism, a few books on Hinduism, Carl Jung's psychology, and a few other topics. Any other questions? Yes. Where was it? Oh, go ahead.
Oh, yes. I'm curious, is Pope Francis of the Franciscan order?
Pope Francis is not a Franciscan by order. He was actually a Jesuit, which is a later order that was developed. But the Pope Francis did take the name Francis in honor of Francis of Assisi, and much of his ideas that a lot in the church consider radical are very Franciscan ideas. His focus on care for the least in society is hugely Franciscan. Yes?
My question is, when you were expressing about God will tell us things that we will not believe.
I'm sorry, I did not catch that. Can you
God
speak
will
up?
tell us
Speak in the
things
mic.
that we will not believe. What would they be by truths that we will not believe?
You want to speak in the mic?
Yeah, my question is, you were telling us that God will tell us things that we believe. We won't believe truths. What truths do they mean? They're talking about the future?
If I heard you correctly, you asked...
You told us a sentence that God will tell us truths that we will not believe.
God will tell us truths that we will not believe.
They were talking about the future.
I don't remember.
Let me write it down.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll try to get to that later.
I've got another question.
Okay.
All creatures have souls.
St. Francis thought so.
Yes? So it means all creatures.
Yes.
All living creatures?
Yes, a lot of scholars think that Francis became a vegetarian because of that belief that all creatures were part of the divine, and that everything was connected in this sacred web of life. So he stopped eating meat. Any other?
Going back to your reference of St. Francis feeding the leper and talking about the sameness, him and the leper being the same. Do you think, based on what she just asked, do you think he was referencing the purity of the inner soul or the physical sameness of being human?
I think it was probably both, honestly. I think that the sameness of being human is an acknowledgement that we are all from the same source, and we're all part of the same life that, in the Christian language, we would say that God breathed life into all things that have breath. Essentially, there's this idea that the breath of God is what sustains life, and so if anything is breathing, that it has God in it. So I think that would be the case. Any others? Yes.
He started out with law, and then he changed to this. What triggered it?
Well, law was kind of an accident for me. I was a political science major in undergrad, and had felt a call to spirituality from a young age. Even as a child, I explored different faiths and different traditions within the Christian faith. I remember in middle school, I told my parents that I wanted to be a Hindu, and in elementary school, I told them I wanted to be a priest, even though we were Baptist and didn't have priests. And so my whole life, I've felt a connection with the divine and with spirituality. So the college that I went to didn't have religious studies as a major, so I majored in political science because that was also an interest. And when I finished, when I finished undergrad, I wasn't really sure what I wanted to do, and I didn't even know what religion I was or what denomination I was. So even though I was drawn to religion and thought that seminary would be wonderful, I didn't know where to go. So I ended up doing what my mother suggested and going to law school. And it was a wonderful experience, and I attained wonderful skills that I hope to be able to use to continue to help people. But I don't think that law was my path. I think that religion and spirituality had always been part of my path. Thank you very much.